everyone, and welcome to the Surgical Ergonomics podcast, where we will be discussing everything related to surgical and procedural ergonomics, the people, ideas, and technology that will help enhance your physical wellness and career longevity. I am your host, Geeta Lal. I'm an academic endocrine surgeon, speaker, consultant, and surgical ergonomics coach. Having experienced work-related musculoskeletal injury myself, I am committed to increasing awareness of and developing solutions to counteract the impact of poor ergonomics on the professional and personal lives of healthcare workers in procedural areas. This episode of the podcast has been sponsored by Sunoptic Surgical. In many ergonomics discussions, we focus on positioning, but wearable technology and visual demands play just as important a role, especially during longer procedures and over the course of a career. Sunoptic has focused on surgical headlights for over 45 years, designing systems with balanced weight distribution and adjustable fit, including 5 different headband options. This flexibility allows surgeons to choose what feels stable without overcompensating. Sunoptics also focus on uniform, high-quality light output to support clear visualization and reduce overall visual strain. Those combined factors can help reduce fatigue and support long-term sustainability in the OR. If this is something you're thinking about, you can learn more at sunopticssurgical.com or clicking their logo on my website podcast page at surgicalergonomics.com/podcast/. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Surgical Ergonomics podcast. In today's episode, I'm really happy to have as our guest Dr. Hillevi Hemphälä. Dr. Hemphälä is an assistant professor at Lund University, Sweden. Her background is actually as an optometrist. She received her PhD in 2014 at Lund University in the field of visual ergonomics. Since then, her research has focused in lighting in healthcare settings, including in surgical areas, neonatal intensive care units, and integrative lighting for hospital wards. She has in fact developed a visual ergonomics risk assessment method called VERAM, V-E-R-A-M, and educates occupational health services and lighting designers in visual ergonomics and the risks in the visual environment. She has actually started a company around this work, and I'll include the link in the show notes. So, hello, Hillevi, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. I want to do what I usually do with our guests on the podcast is just initially to get the ball rolling, perhaps ask you to share a little bit about yourself, including kind of where you grew up and a little bit more about your training background and how you came to be in your current role.
I grew up in the southern part of Sweden and started studying to become an optometrist, fairly late. I was 25 plus when I started in that area. And when I came out as an optometrist, one of the first patients that I had was actually a law student that came in with a severe headache issue. And I did all of the testing that I could possibly imagine on her eyes, and I couldn't find anything wrong with her eyes whatsoever. And that made me think, what's going on here? So I started sort of asking more questions and sort of like, when do you get the headaches? And she was like, when I'm at the lectures or when I'm at the library studying. And I was like, that's 2 very specific times when you do get the headaches. But you don't study at home? Yes, I do. And I'm like, but you don't get headaches then? No, I don't. And I'm like, what do you do when you're at home? And she's like, well, I like to make it a bit cozy, so I lit a candle and make myself a cup of tea. And that was the amount of light that she could actually take. She was very severely light sensitive.
Wow.
So as soon as she was exposed to glare, any type of glare, she got the headaches. So I told her, well, you need to become a hat person. So you need to wear a hat indoors with a brim on so that you could actually cover her eyes. And she came back 2 weeks later stating that all the headaches are gone. Thank you so much.
Wow.
And that really made me think like, oh my goodness, being an optometrist is not just to be sort of fixing glasses and the correct power of contact lenses or glasses for that matter, it is you need to be able to sort of understand other issues as well, such as the lighting. So then I became or went to school to study lighting design. And then it turned out that I'm one of two optometrists in the world that have studied lighting design.
Amazing.
So all of a sudden, I had very much sort of special competence. So then I was offered to do a PhD in the field of visual ergonomics. And that was it like 22 years ago, and I'm still hanging on. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for, sharing your journey. It just goes to show that, you don't have to be in the same career your entire life, right?
Oh,
It's
no.
a long life, and
Yeah.
our interests change, and it's okay to pivot. As you know, I'm in the middle of my own pivot. For that, actually, I want to share with our listeners that Hillevi and I actually connected on LinkedIn. That's where I've been spending a lot of time as I transitioned from my clinical work to working on my business full time. And you commented, I think, on one of my posts when I was
Yeah.
talking about surgeons experiencing work-related musculoskeletal injury and disease at rates comparable to construction workers. I was so sort of intrigued by your comment because you said, bad lighting in the OR can lead to not just eye strain, but can contribute to musculoskeletal symptoms in the neck and the shoulders. And it was really my first introduction to the field, visual ergonomics, as you said. For our
Yeah.
listeners, we've talked, what we talk about on this podcast a lot is physical ergonomics, right? Because
Yeah.
how we position, how we adjust our posture, etc. And then recently, I had the pleasure of having Dr. Patricia Tribovich on the podcast, and she talked about cognitive ergonomics and how it applies in kind of the operating room setting. And then
Mhm.
I've heard of organizational ergonomics, but I must admit, visual ergonomics was a revelation to me. And now I understand why, because there aren't many people studying it or
No.
experts in the area. And we happen to have you, one of the world
Yeah.
experts, today
Thank
as
you.
our guest. All right. So, you shared with us how you became kind of interested in this field, and I've kind of seen some of your work pertaining to mail workers and, computer screens in various settings. But I want to now sort of ask you, what was it that actually prompted you to start studying kind of surgical areas and surgical lighting?
It was merely actually by accident because
Mm,
my colleagues were doing organizational issues in the OR,
hmm
and they were like, "Well, we have some extra funds here. Can't you do something in the OR?" I'm like, "Well, the lighting is perfect. It should be perfect in the OR, so why should I even bother? Like,
hmm
come along and let's see for yourself." And I'm like, "Oh, I have loads to do here." So, yeah, that was the starting point. Looking into open surgery first
hmm
and looking into the lighting recommendations for that. And one of the main things that we noted was actually usually the surgeons, when you sort of you need to buy a new oral light fixture,
hmm
and the surgical lights, the only thing that is usually asked about that is how many lux do they give?
Right.
So how much light do they give? So that amount of light that they actually could give just increased and increased and increased and increased to an insane level, because that was the only question that the surgeons actually asked.
Mm,
So all of a sudden, sort of the standards were like, well, we need to increase, and I came into the OR and there was a new surgical light,
hmm
and all of a sudden I could sort of look at the light source, and it was just 7 centimeters wide, which is like 3 inches,
hmm hmm
and just a bit outside of that, it was sort of dark.
hmm hmm
And then all of a sudden, what happens if you have a bigger surgical wound?
hmm
It's
hmm
dark in the edges. It's like, this is not good at all. And then one of the OR nurses, she said, well, when I'm in surgery, I get so adapted to the brightness in the surgical wound.
hmm
So when I
hmm
need to look at the instrument table,
Hmm.
I need to remember where I place the instruments because I cannot detect where instruments are placed. I can't
Wow.
see it because I'm so adapted to this. So it
Hmm. Hmm.
takes me a while before my eyes can readjust to that lower level. And
Hmm.
you can compare that when you come from severe sunlight and then you go inside and sometimes you can hardly see anything. That's what she experienced when just looking from the OR area and
Hmm.
then over to the instrument table. She couldn't see anything. So she had to remember where she placed the instruments. And I was like,
Wow.
that's not that much patient safety. I was like, oh, this is really
Right.
scary.
Suddenly you felt the hairs on the nape of your neck rise, right? You're like,
Yes.
yeah,
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 big time. So I was like, oh, but oh, I need to do something about this. This is not good at all.
yeah.
So, and that's the way and then it's just sort of escalated from there,
Okay.
doing different studies.
That's so fascinating to hear. I want to sort of highlight a couple of things for myself as well as our listeners.
Yeah.
Again, it's like this sometimes, opportunities come knocking and
Yeah,
the idea is don't say no right off the bat, right? Take a look and you never know. You
exactly.
might find your next career in some opportunity which you thought was going to
Yeah.
really be nothing, right?
Yeah.
So kudos to you for doing that. And then I want to come back to this other point that you said. The surgeons asked for new light fixtures.
Yeah.
I have to ask you because this would not happen in the US. Just like nobody would say to you, "Oh, we have funds left over. Do you want to use them?" That never happens, okay? Maybe that's unique to Sweden.
It never happens in Sweden either. So this was just a very, very
Very
coincidental,
specific
actually. Yeah.
situation. Okay. And then the second thing that I'm surprised about that maybe you can clarify is that, here, I mean, I've worked in Canada and I've worked in the United States in the ORs. No one ever asked the surgeons about what lux the overhead light is going to be. I mean, those decisions are made by facilities and the builders and the people designing the ORs. I mean, we just show up and operate in whatever was fixed up in the overhead light. So is that something in Sweden you've noticed that surgeons do get to ask how bright?
Yes,
Yeah.
because it's usually, I think it's in all over Europe in
Mm-hmm.
most cases, actually.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's about what I'm aware of.
Sure.
It's like they can have showcases, so they can
Mm-hmm.
show
Mm-hmm.
you different ones.
Okay.
And then they know it's the amount of light. It's the amount of lux
Yeah.
that's the most important. And then they can have an input in what type that is
Right.
actually ordered. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Now, when you were talking about kind of that light that you were looking at that was 3 inches wide
yeah,
and, very bright in the field, were you
yeah,
mentioning that for the overhead light in the room, or were you thinking about a headlight? Because, we use all sorts of lighting, right?
yeah,
So,
exactly. Well, the headlights, they usually give like 50,000 lux.
okay.
But in this case, most of the surgical light sources, they give like between 100,000 and 200,000 lux.
Oh, I see. Okay. So
Yeah. So
you were
it's
referring to the overhead light. Okay.
yeah, so yeah, the bigger ones, not the headlight. No,
Not the
no,
headlight. Okay.
no. And then you have the general lighting in the room that is usually sort of 1,000 lux
And
for
that's
a
the
few.
light kind of in the periphery of the room.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
So the
1,000.
general lighting or the ambient
Yeah.
lighting is about
Ambient lighting.
1,000 lux. Yeah,
Got it. Now, when you point out the lux or the amount of light, it makes sense that somebody would experience glare. Like it's like you said, going from like a bright sunny day back into inside. If the difference
yeah,
is 1,000 lux versus if you have a really bright, 100,000 lux overhead light. Understood. Okay.
exactly.
Yeah. So now, aside from the glare, which kind of makes sense to all of us because we've all experienced it, I want to hear more about the work that you did, specifically that you recently published about sort of how the lighting situation or the visual ergonomics that are going on in the operating room can actually be a contributor for musculoskeletal issues for healthcare workers. So if you can take us through, what the purpose of the study was, what you did, how you did it, and then, what you found.
Well, the first study with surgical lights and
Mm-hmm.
surgical operating rooms was actually with open surgery. So
Mm-hmm.
we did produce some sort of lighting recommendations for the amount of light from the surgical lights, but
Mm-hmm.
also the amount of light that should be in the operating room, in the ambient lighting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was the first one that we looked into. And the amazing part, I want to go back to that again, was
Mm-hmm.
that with the surgical lighting, and when you have that about at 100,000 lux, we measured how long it would actually take for you to get your visual acuity back that you had previously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
On average, about 2 minutes.
Yikes!
So if you have a multiple trauma,
Mm-hmm.
you need
Mm-hmm.
to wait for 2 minutes before the surgeon's eyes will actually work again.
Wow.
This is for the details with
Mm-hmm.
low
Mm-hmm.
contrast, and that was sort of what really amazed me. Did does take time
Mm-hmm.
from that, and then I've been dealing with when we developed Veram, we did do a lot of different assessments. So it was both hospital personnel, but also office workers and other, so many different
Mm-hmm.
occupations were involved in that one. And this is where we noticed also that even in questionnaires,
Mm-hmm.
people that rate that they have eye strain, they have 2 to 3 times as much musculoskeletal strain from neck, upper back, shoulder region, and even arms.
Mm. Okay.
So there's a direct correlation between straining your eye and muscle activity increasement.
Mm-hmm.
And this has also been detected in lab studies. So if you mess with the eyes, the muscle activity in trapezius, one of the bigger muscles in the upper back, is increased.
And this is based on EMG studies.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is really, there's a direct connection between straining your eye, and that is binocularly straining your eye. So when using both eyes at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
straining your eye, the muscle activity in the upper back will actually be increased.
Okay.
So, so if you only use one eye, there's
Mm-hmm.
not that connection with the rest of the
Mm.
body. So it's something to do with the binocular vision and
I see.
that. And this is usually something that you deal with when you are working. You need to use both eyes at the same time to be able to get the depth.
Right.
Otherwise, it's really hard for a surgeon if you don't
Yeah.
have the depth ability.
God help
Make a
us.
cut,
Yes.
and all
Yeah.
of a sudden you don't know if you're cutting on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now it's interesting. I want to hear a little bit more about how you did this assessment, during surgery. Like, was this during simulated tasks or were you actually in the OR and
Yeah.
having people kind of look away and then measuring their acuity with like, a little visual chart?
Yeah.
How did you, describe the setup for me because I'm really fascinated with
Yeah.
this.
Well, both of the studies we did, the first study that we did was for open surgery, and the
Mm-hmm.
second one was for minimal invasive surgery. So
Okay.
the first one, they're basically very similar setups. So the first one was a lab study where we
Mm-hmm.
did in the real operating theater or
Mm-hmm.
surgical suite or whatever word you want to use.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in this case, it's so they did do different tasks and they had to sort of light adapt to the brightness of the surgical light and then look up and try to read, as just as you say, a visual acuity board with
Mm-hmm.
contrast visual acuity. And then just to see what happens with the vision. So we tried it at 35,000, at 65,000, and at 100,000 lux.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And 100,000 lux was the worst. So it took them really, really long time, almost 2 minutes on
2 minutes.
average, to actually
Mm-hmm.
readjust
Mm-hmm.
to and be able to read the same line that they did before being
Mm-hmm.
exposed to that glare. And
Mm-hmm.
what we also noticed is when we look at glare, it's really important that we talk about the contrast, the differences in contrast. And this is something, luminance is something that we can see. So all the things that we see in our visual field, that has a specific amount of luminance. And luminance is measured in candela per square meter. The brightness of a surface,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
it could even be directly from a luminaire. So everything is sort of the brightness of a surface. And that is measured in luminance. And then you can make a luminance ratio. And
Mm-hmm.
then based from that, you can actually see how much glare are you exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
For the first study, it was 140 to 1 in luminance ratio.
Wow, that's with the 100,000 lux
Yes,
lights. Okay.
to the rest of the area, to
Mm-hmm.
the average area in the rest of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And usually we talk about if it's more than 20 to 1, there's a high risk for glare.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If it's more than 5 to 1, there's a risk for glare. Now
Wow.
we're talking about 140 to 1. So this is just sort of, it really blew my mind. This is so bad and it's so hard, and I'm really impressed that you are doing such a good job. Well, the surgeons are doing their main focus. They hardly look up from the
Right,
operating
right,
cavity.
right.
So they're adjusted to that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of the operating staff or operating
Mm-hmm.
personnel, they
Mm-hmm.
need to look at both.
Right, right.
And
So
that's
it,
what makes it so much harder for them to perform their work task.
right. So it seems to disproportionately affect the support personnel, the nurses and the
Yes.
scrub techs compared to the
Yes.
surgeons.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure it affects the surgeons because I can recall times where, yes, I am looking at my field, but sometimes you want to look up and look at the monitor or the
Yeah.
imaging. And yeah, you look up and suddenly the rest of the room is not so bright. It's dark. And you're like, okay, wait a second. I need to look at the vitals, what's going on. But you're right. We've kind of adapted to this. And so now I'm interested to hear, like, based on your study, what were the recommendations that you would make to the healthcare institution in terms
Yeah.
of what should happen in the hospital? I mean, are there standards? Are there
There are
existing standards?
standards.
Okay,
There are American standards, and then there are European standards
I
and
see.
international standards.
Okay.
So the international standards, they usually say, well, 1,000 lux is the ambient lighting in the
Uh-huh.
surgical suite or operating
Uh-huh.
room,
Uh-huh.
and then it just has a comment, 100,000 lux for the operating cavity. And I was wondering for a very long time, where do that 100,000 lux come from?
Right.
And after digging, I think it took me like 3 years to find that out. And I found a retired person that was involved in creating the standards once. And he was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, that was the amount of lux that the surgical luminaires could actually create.
I see.
And I'm like, so you base the entire recommendation of what they could actually create once or give once.
Right.
So it was completely idiotic.
Well, to be fair, all the surgeons, we usually just say there's not enough light. I mean, that's a standard
Yeah.
thing. I always say because, when we have, depending on the kind of surgery you're doing, the deeper
Mm.
you are, or if there's even a little bit of blood, that seems to suck up the light.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so it's always, there's not enough light. We
Not
don't we
enough
don't
light.
always think about where we're placing the lights.
No.
But if they're what you're saying is if the lights are placed appropriately, that's too much lux, too
Yeah.
many lux.
Too
Yeah.
many lux. And
Okay.
what we discovered in the first study for the open surgery was that we increased the amount of light just surrounding the operating table.
Okay.
So we increased that to 5,500 lux
So you
instead of a
bring down the
thousand.
ratio. So you bring
Yeah,
down the
to bring
ratio.
down the ratio. So 1,000 in 1,000 or 2,000 in the sort of peripheral part of the operating room, and then about 5,000 to 6,000 around the bed. And
Mm,
that made it easier for you not to be in that position where there's too much difference.
I see.
And the funny thing was, unfortunately not significant, but the average usually, so we did do the lab study, and then we did do a field study
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
they compared. So it was actually randomized. So today we're performing surgery in the old lighting, and now we're doing the new lighting. So it was like randomized somehow.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then we asked them to rate the visual ability, rate the tiredness, and rate all of these other things as well. And then what we also had them to do was that when everything was set, just before the surgeon actually made the first cut and
Hmm.
everything was set the way they were supposed to be,
Hmm.
they put a light meter right underneath or above the patient,
Hmm.
just to be
Hmm.
able to measure how much light is it from the surgical lights.
Right.
And that average was higher in the old lighting than in the new lighting.
Interesting. Okay.
So you didn't need as much lighting from the surgical lights when there was better ambient lighting.
I see. I see.
Yeah. So all of us,
Okay.
and they didn't change it as much
Mm-hmm,
either
mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
they were more satisfied with the lighting.
Right. Well, that would
Yeah.
make intuitive sense. It sounds like it made sense in your study. And we'll be back right after the short break. Surgeons and proceduralist colleagues, we trained for years to master what we do, but most of us are never taught how to protect our bodies while doing our jobs. Neck pain, shoulder fatigue, back stiffness after long cases. For many of us, this isn't the exception, it's routine. I'm launching the first cohort of a virtual hybrid coaching program in surgical and procedural ergonomics, designed for clinicians who want to perform at a high level without sacrificing physical health or career longevity. The program includes 2 small group sessions plus 2 individualized one-on-one coaching sessions using PostChecker, which is an AI-based motion capture system that provides personalized, actionable ergonomic insights both inside and outside the OR. I'm Geeta Lal, an endocrine surgeon with over 2 decades in the operating room and firsthand experience with the pain that comes from operating. I'm joined in this endeavor by Linda Miller, an occupational therapist and certified professional ergonomist, and together we bring real-world OR-tested solutions to you. If you're ready to invest in your performance and your longevity, email me at geeta@surgicalergonomics.com to get details and register. Your body is not disposable. Your career shouldn't be either. Yeah, now I know that you have sort of the laparoscopic surgery version of this
Yes.
study. Are
Yeah.
you, in review, are you able to share any data or not today? Yeah.
But what I can share is actually what we studied. So we
Okay.
did the old type of lighting that we compared here was like that's when you sort of turn off most of the lighting and then you just have a tiny light above the anesthesiologist area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then and that was just 50 lux. And that's sort of what the standards say. You're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
have about 50 lux there.
Mm-hmm.
But 50 lux for them to be able to read on bottles and stuff, they usually use sort of other light sources to be able to see anything because they can't read in 50 lux, especially
Right.
if you're 45 plus of
Right.
age. Then all of a sudden your eyes doesn't, well, you can't read in
Mm-hmm.
50 lux.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way. So
Mm-hmm.
then they ran over to the door and tried to sort of get some light from the door and other things there as well. So it's not really a safety, that much safety in that when you
Mm.
dim it down. So what we wanted to know is that how much can you actually increase the lighting in the operating room without it affecting the visibility on the screen?
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So we tried to have 100 lux in the entire room,
Mm-hmm.
not just 50 lux. So double, but in the entire room. And then we also tried the colored lighting because now there's a company that are actually delivering colored lighting, and
Mm-hmm.
that means that you have green light behind the screen, and then
Mm-hmm.
you have red light behind the surgeon,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that means that it doesn't have so it won't give us much reflections in the screen. So
I
it's
see.
more of an ergonomic lighting,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Mm-hmm.
also have about 100 lux as a general sort of ambient lighting
I
levels in
see.
that color lighting situation. So this is why we wanted to try out 100 lux white light and 100 lux color light
Colored
and
light.
how will
Mm-hmm.
that affect. And then we wanted to try, can we increase it even further? So then we
Mm-hmm.
tried 300 lux, and you cannot adjust it further. Don't go to 300 lux because that's too
Good.
much.
Good to
That's sort of
know.
what I can say. Otherwise, I think that we need to wait for the paper to come out.
Absolutely. So I
Yeah,
think listeners of the
hopefully
pod.
within the next couple of weeks or a month or something like that. So
Okay,
it's very
so that
close.
sounds like the paper will be available by the time this episode airs. And
Mm,
for our listeners, I will
yeah.
include the links to the paper in the open surgery that we talked
Hmm.
about today, and hopefully also the laparoscopic surgery. So now, Hillevi, I have to ask this question, right? So I think I want to know, supposing I go into an OR tomorrow in a different hospital, and I want to sort of make sure that my lighting is optimized, again, to optimize my overall ergonomics. What should I ask for? I can ask for, somebody will tell me the lux of the overhead light. And then how should I say that, well, I want like a gradation of light. I want, this 100,000 lux or whatever up top, but I want like a little bit more around the surgical
Yeah.
area. So how much area and what lux? And then, could
About,
you give me specifics? Yeah.
yeah. So about 1.5 meter out from the central of the
Of the
sort of
field. Mm-hmm.
of the field. So 1.5 meter out, which is I think 5 feet
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
out
Okay.
from the center. And that is sort of where you should have like 5 to 6,000
Got it.
lux.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in the meantime, I was just thinking how I might adjust my room if they cannot get that light is, I can put an overhead light right over the patient, my field, but
Yeah.
would it help to have another light where on the nursing instrument
Yeah.
table?
It would actually do that. Yes.
Okay. So when we adjust our lights, we should make sure that one of them is on for the nursing table as well.
Yeah.
And then a more practical suggestion, how do they accomplish this 1.5 meter around the field middle zone lighting? Like,
Yeah.
I've seen we have
They
overhead
just,
lights and we have ambient lights. Do you need to install more lights or how do you?
yes,
Yeah,
you
okay.
need to install more lights, more luminaires or light fixtures right above the surgical table. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Did you actually in the study or from, your vast amount of knowledge in this field, can you tell us if there is a difference, supposing like institutions don't want to or can't install these additional light sources, as you said, in that 1.5 meter zone? If we were to do what we just talked about, which is to make sure that we have, two lights that we have in our field and make sure the nurses have, another light fixture on their instrument table, is that comparable to having this three zones of light or it's a
I think
compromise?
it's a compromise, but you
Okay.
need to somehow increase the amount of light. Sometimes, if it would have been an office environment, I would say go with indirect lighting. So you
Hmm.
have a pendant lighting and then you have indirect lighting into
Hmm.
the room. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, in the surgical suite, well, that's a dust area, so you're
Yeah.
not allowed to have that type of luminaires in there. So unfortunately, it is hard to do something if you cannot add on fixtures in the ceiling. It is very, very hard to do something else. But increase the general lighting as much as possible, or the ambient lighting, so that it's higher, as
Hmm.
high as it can go. And I
Right.
would say that's a lot better. Also make sure that the color rendering index is good. And this is something in the old type of fluorescent lighting, for example.
Hmm.
The color rendering wasn't that bad due to the wavelengths, the colors that was inside that light source.
Hmm. Hmm.
But with LED, it's so much better.
Mm.
So, but still, the amount of red in an LED is not good.
Mm.
So if you don't have a CRI of 80 or if you only have of 80, I wouldn't say that's enough, that's sufficient enough for a operating room. I
I
would
see.
say that you need to have more than 90 for a CRI to actually be able to see properly. You don't
Okay.
really have the problem with LED that you might have previously to be able to see sort of, or you need to see if the lips turn blue or something like that, or the
Sure.
skin tone. That sort of works fairly okay with LED,
Hmm.
unless besides the red part.
Got it.
So the
Okay.
skin looks a bit different in LED than it does sort of in daylight or
Hmm.
in the incandescent lights or whatever. So LED, the spectral wavelengths inside the LED is quite different.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
therefore, it's really important that we have a CRI of 90 or more. So
Got
that's
it.
also something that you can require when you're installing new luminaires or something like that.
Very interesting. Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now, That brings me, and now that I've been sort of staring at us on a Zoom meeting on a computer screen, so I'm going to ask, and I have to ask, as you know, a lot of healthcare workers now, everything is charted, right, in the electronic health record, whether you're nursing, whether you're an anesthesiologist, whether you're surgical teams, when we're not operating, and subjecting ourselves to kind of the physical strain there. Now you're sitting at a computer and
Yeah.
we're exactly, faced with that poor law student that first came to see you. So what are some tips that you can give our listeners about how to set up their office at home and at work, their workspace, so that they are minimizing the light strain contribution to the musculoskeletal strain?
The main thing is actually to check, use the hat test that I recommended her to wear a hat, but you can
Hmm.
do that just by putting your hands up like this.
I
If this
see.
is more comfortable,
So cover your eyes at the
cover
top
your
on your
eyes
forehead. Yeah.
on your forehead. And
Hmm.
if that's more comfortable, just like you put on a baseball cap, hat
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
and just cover your eyes like that. And if that's more comfortable, then you're exposed to glare.
Mm.
And then you need to start questioning, oh, what type? Oh, it's that one over there. Okay, then I need to change that one, or I need to
Hmm.
re, sort of change my furnitures around, or anything like
Hmm.
that. So
Hmm.
all of these things can actually do a lot.
Hmm.
So the glare issue is one of the main issues in the visual environment. The other one is non-visual flicker from LEDs.
Mm.
And this is something that come up, and this is the second paper that we're writing on. I haven't even said anything to you about that, but
Hmm.
we've actually done fMRI studies
Hmm.
with healthy subjects and migraineurs.
I see.
And unfortunately, I can't say anything about the migraineurs so far because
Hmm.
that paper has just been accepted with minor revisions. So
Okay.
it's getting
Congratulations.
out there.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing for that one. But the healthy subjects, we can actually see that they have an increase of blood
Hmm.
flow in the brain when the light
Wow.
sources are flickering.
I see. Okay. Okay. So
Yeah,
I mean, I can understand that, you can kind of see if glare is affecting you. We can get
yeah,
like anti-glare, kind of covering for our laptop, things like that. But how do you adjust for this LED flicker?
exactly. Because it's non-visual. So you don't
I
know
see.
even if that it's there.
I see.
But you can use your phones.
How so?
You can use your phone and check for flicker. So you can use your phone. I need to grab a light source over here.
Yes, thank you.
So here I have a light source that is flickering. And what you can do is that you'll just check with your phone.
Uh-huh. Oh, you put your camera on. Oh, wow. You can actually see. Okay. Yes.
So you can see the stripes,
Mm-hmm.
or when you film in slow motion, you can actually see that it flickers.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
film in slow motion with your camera, or check at a very, very close distance, take a photo of the
Mm-hmm.
light source itself. And then
Mm-hmm.
if you see any stripe patterns, you know that it flickers with a non-visual flicker.
Mm-hmm.
And that can, as I stated, without saying too much, we looked at migraineurs too.
Right, right. How do you then sort of mitigate that once you see, okay, there is a flicker? Do you need a different light? What?
You need a different light source
Okay.
because
And
it's the chip inside of the LED that is faulty.
I see. Okay.
So it's a driver of the LED lights that is actually wrong
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
manufactured. So you need a new one.
Okay, so I can imagine that I'm going to make sure that, we post a video clip of what you showed, like when we do our
Yeah,
social media promotions.
yeah,
And I think I'll be checking my lights this evening with the camera to see about the flicker and replace the light in my office if it is getting
yeah,
a flicker.
yeah.
Hillevi, I'm always amazed at how quickly time goes when we are
Yes,
talking about these things, but I do know that I think we will have you back for another episode. We've gotten a taste of visual ergonomics and we've just scratched the surface,
yeah.
and I think people will want to learn more. I know I want to learn more, but I do want to really say how grateful I am to you for one, connecting online, and two, for being so gracious and agreeing to be on my podcast without knowing me from a hole in the wall to talk about visual ergonomics, a field that we really don't know much about, but you have a lot of expertise. And so, a lot of gratitude from me to you.
Thank you so much for having me here and inviting me.
Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media, Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We love feedback, so please reach out to us for topics, ideas, speakers, or if you ever want to be a guest on the show. Thank you for listening.